I'm here with Dr. Iris Freelander, and we'd like to talk to you today about praise and celebration. In New Thought metaphysical philosophy, we spend a lot of time talking to and teaching people the power of positive thinking and affirmative thinking. And we say so often that we live in our minds and not in the world. The way that we think determines the way that we feel, although we sometimes think that we don't have great control over our lives and our feelings, but we indeed do. And praise and thanksgiving really, or praise and celebration, really give us the ability to enrich and strengthen our lives, don't they?
Yes, indeed it does. And that's the first line of duty on our part when we pray and when we think, and because thought can be a prayer, just a thought can be a prayer. Mm-hmm. So if we offer praise and adoration or praise and thanksgiving, then we are creating in a positive way. Mm-hmm. And it's a wonderful thing to know that we can do that.
It is. And also when we deal with people, so often we forget to praise them, don't we? You know, we spend a lot of time criticizing, most of us.
Unfortunately.
But we all like praise, and we all actually respond to praise. And it's important that we remember that every thought and every word and every deed that we experience in life creates a vibration. And so often on this program, we talk about that issue of vibration and energy, because for a lot of people, it's a new concept or a different concept. But the energy that's emanated from us through our thoughts and through our actions, through our prayers, through our words, all have the ability to either offer praise and affirmation or negation and movement in the opposite direction. So praising people is, I wonder, why is it, do you think, that we have such a hard time remembering to praise people?
Well, I think that we do praise people a great deal, and I know you do at our church. You're very good at that and sincere. And that's another thing. We need to be sincere if we're praising. We can't just say it by rote and act as if we're saying it because we think we should. We have to put some energy and feeling into it. And we can just know ourselves that we're very pleased, and it makes us feel good when people praise us, not because we need the praise necessarily I'm thinking of in our work, mm-hmm. but because it means that people are really pleased and we're succeeding in what we set out to do, to help people. Mm-hmm. And so I think that we do give people praise when it's when we need to thank them, then we praise them as we thank them.
Right. And we also have the ability, too, to praise people in the process and after the process of correction. You know, and I'm thinking of children, but also in our workplace and in our personal relationships. As we move through the difficulties that we have, we're able to praise the people even after we've offered some constructive means of improving themselves. And I don't like that term, constructive criticism. I don't know that there's such a thing. But and I'm not talking about criticizing people, but I'm thinking of children particularly, or people in the workplace, or in our homes. And we can praise people for the ability that they have to overcome some negative experience or to overcome a challenge that they've been faced with and maybe they haven't been dealing with so effectively.
Yes, and it works on all age levels. I know my little 14-month-old grandson, he crawls through his toy in the backyard, and it has holes in it. So he crawls through, and then when he crawls out, he stands up and applauds. Mm-hmm. And he applauds himself. Uh-huh. So he's praising himself that he was able to do that. And it reminds me to praise him, and not over much. I think sometimes we do it over much with children, and they expect to be applauded everything they do. Mm-hmm. If they take a breath, they think it's a wonderful thing. They need to be applauded for it. And I've seen children who are really disadvantaged themselves for that reason. Mm-hmm. So we don't want to overdo it. But again, we want to be sincere. And whenever we can praise any group or any individual, then it creates it's like a boomerang for us. It comes back and gives us that lovely energy too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That's the whole process of outflow and inflow. Yes. So we're sending out mm-hmm. constantly. And I think we need to be mindful of that. And we spend a lot of time talking about the power of thought and the ability of thought to create our environment and to create not only our environment for ourselves internally in our life experience, but for those around. And so it is a wonderful, wonderful dynamic experience. I was thinking when you were talking about your grandson, though, that experience of praise, like in his case in the backyard, he was praising and he was celebrating at the same time, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
And that celebration, he was applauding. And you know, a celebration is a happy time, and it's a time that does applaud. You know, so we applaud when we celebrate, and we have fun, and we interact, and we're positive, and we're joyous, and we share that with others. And that celebration of life is so important. And when we have our church services, we don't call them just church services, we call them celebration services, because there is the purpose of gathering together, as we all do, to share our faith, and also to celebrate the joy of our faith and the joy of life and the joy of who and what we are. And that doesn't have to be in a religious context. Of course, on Sunday morning it is, but that's celebration. And I think so often we stop celebrating, and we sometimes think it's inappropriate to celebrate. One of the things that we do in business a lot, in my business that I do, and of course we all work outside the church, and is that when times are difficult in a business environment, one of the greatest things I think we can do is have a party. And it's not a way of escaping, although it does escape the situation momentarily. But what it does is it creates a unity of persons, and celebration creates a unity of persons. It creates an environment in which we can become one with those around us. We can celebrate with a loved one or friend, as we do in an anniversary or a special event. And so that's bringing together people. We can celebrate alone as well. But when we celebrate in groups, and of course the thing we think about celebrating is having a party. Well, in fact, having a party is not a bad thing, because when we have parties, we do have this issue of fellowship and communion and the coming together of people, and in a non-judgmental way in most environments. And we then begin to praise ourselves and others through the act of celebration. And we can celebrate our lives in so many ways. We can celebrate our lives in external ways, such as parties, but we can celebrate our lives just by the way that we think about life, and we can celebrate the joyful reality of all of the good and wonderful things that we have. And for most of us, we have more good and wonderful things than we have negative things, although many of us walk through life in a very negative way, and that is exactly what our work is about. That's what our ministry is about. That's what our counseling work is about. That's what all of our interactions are about, getting people out of that negativity of life into the positive and affirmative reality of who and what we all are.
Yes, it's really sad when people take the negative approach to life. And when you were describing having a party, well, it changes the energy within each individual who attends that party, doesn't it? And not only does it change their energy then and there, but it's residual, and they go home and feel happy and cheerful and feel good about themselves and the company, as opposed to then going home and feeling negative about it. And sometimes it just takes something like that to break the energy, the negative energy that's formed. And it's a wonderful thing when we can remember to do that. Or just giving someone a little token gift or special words of praise and celebration will change the energy level, because everything, as we always say, is energy and vibration. And so when we change that, it can be residual for a long time, can't it?
Absolutely. And that issue of energy and vibration is really important, because it goes to the heart of what we believe in from a spiritual standpoint and from a psychological standpoint. And that is that the energy that we create, and of course we all are constantly filled with energy internally and externally, and we're emitting energy and we're absorbing energy, and we're also creating vibrations. And those vibrations are felt by us. They're felt in our physical bodies. And we know that the mind-body-spirit connection, we know what stress can do, we know what depression can do to the physical body, so there's that connection. So that vibration is created, and it changes the energy structure of our physical bodies, of our spiritual being, and of our mental perception and reality. And as we are able to enter into this praise and celebration, then we do change that energy for ourselves and for those around us. And I was just thinking, as you were talking about the celebration, the issue of celebration. Celebration is usually a spontaneous thing. Doesn't have to be, can be planned, but often it's a spontaneous thing. It just happens. We begin to celebrate because this event or that event has taken place. And I was thinking about the fact that in our memorial services, so often we call them celebrations of life. And of course, a lot of people have a hard time with that because they think we ought to be a little more somber. But the celebration of one's life, the celebration of who and what an individual is, their contribution, and of course every one of us, the great and the small, if there are such things, all make wonderful contributions to life just by being here.
Yeah.
Everyone is making a contribution to life and to the life experience, no matter what they believe about themselves, no matter what their social standing or their socioeconomic reality is, or any of those things that we label people with. And to move into a time of celebrating that reality of life and celebrating life always is a wonderful, uplifting experience.
Yes, and we know people who through illness have been able to contribute to the lives of other people, and that's a very lovely thing, and it shows the greatness and goodness of God in just emanating from the life of every person. And that's what we're doing, isn't it? When we praise and celebrate, we're functioning from our higher state of being, the high self within us. And as we do that more and more, then the more we function from that higher aspect of being, the more we're able to do it. And children who are born with problems, health problems, very often contribute so greatly to the lives of the people around them because they're so innocent and uplifted themselves in spite of their illnesses. And so when we look at life from that vantage point, we can see how fortunate those of us are who are seemingly healthy, and how we really have an obligation to help lift the spirits of others who are less fortunate.
And that higher consciousness or higher awareness of being is tremendously important. And I think so often in Western theology and spirituality, we miss that point, and we don't spend much time thinking about the fact that we do have a higher self, don't we? And of course, Mary Baker Eddy, the founders of Christian Science, and Ernest Holmes from religious science, and the Fillmores from Unity, all of which are from the same philosophical and religious backgrounds as we are, all taught the importance of connecting with the higher self. And the higher self is in communion with the divine. And that union with the divine gives us a limitless source of intelligence, because we don't believe that the divine or the presence of God is something out there or up there, although it's everywhere. We think it's right here within us. And as we access the reality of its presence within us, then we're able to look at life in a totally different way. But more importantly, we're able to connect our higher self with divine mind or with the presence and power of God. And then our lives are really opened up in wonderful ways.
Yes, it is. And you and I each lead meditation groups at our church, and we can see the difference in people when we do have those meditations, because people are just lifted and lighted as a consequence, and they like that feeling. And I don't think I've ever heard anyone criticize. I don't know, there might be people who would be critical of anything, but people express their appreciation for that very fully, that it changes their whole life almost. And that's a wonderful thing too. But that's fun. They are functioning from their own higher aspect of being when they go into meditation. And then as they sit through a church service quietly and receptively, then they're more infilled with the energy of their own high self. And I'm not sure that people even realize that they're creating it within themselves. We're not creating it. We're giving them the energy to create it themselves.
And that empowers those who are participating to take responsibility for themselves as co-creators.
Yes.
And that's an interesting concept, isn't it? So often we believe that God is the creative power, or somebody else creates life and creates things. But in fact, we are creating constantly, and we are co-creators with the presence and power of God in every aspect of our lives. And the work that the divine has done in our lives is finished. It's complete. But then our realization of that and understanding of that is what evolves through our own education, our own learning, and our own realization. And of course, one of the things we do want to point out is we're not talking about anybody changing their faith or religion, and we're not challenging anyone's religion. And the principles that we teach and we share are universal and can be applied to people of any faith. But this aspect and this concept may be new and different to people, especially from traditional backgrounds.
Yes, it might be, but if they really look at their lives and the teachings that they have employed, then they'll see that it's all the same. It's all the same regardless of what religion or what type of religion, like there's so many different types. And so it's all the same. A creator God is all good, and God is love, God is all good, and God can work through us as long as we're open and receptive to that divine energy. And when we're not open and receptive to it, and we then are allowing the shadow self within us to manifest, then we're blocking our own good. Mm-hmm. So if we can just remember that we, as you said, we do co-create. And we create our own destiny. We create our own environment. We create everything. We co-create with God, whatever. But we also co-create with lower forces if we're going into the negative. But sometimes I wonder, is there anything negative to God? Because God is all good, what seems negative to us might seem very normal and right to that high aspect of being. Would you say so?
I think that's a valid statement and a good point at which to pause in our program and offer you the opportunity to receive some literature so that you can continue to study the ideas and concepts that we're sharing with you today.
We would like to offer you the opportunity to receive one of these free booklets to further your understanding of the New Thought message of confident living. Each month we will feature a different booklet, which will be mailed to you free and postage paid. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807.
Before the break, you touched upon a wonderful subject, and I think we ought to spend a few minutes talking about it, and that is the concept of the negative aspects of life. Mm-hmm. And the lower aspects, or what people may be accustomed, especially from Western theological and faith traditions, as knowing as evil. That aspect of life, when we think about it, one of the interesting concepts about it is that from our faith tradition, and you said it so beautifully just before the break, that the presence and power of God is the only reality. Mm-hmm. And so that which is of God is real. That which is divine is real. And as Mary Baker Eddy taught so beautifully, that which is not of God is not real. And so what happens is these negative experiences, the lower aspects of life, are real to the extent that they exist on this plane of life, that is in the earthly life, and they touch us, and we participate with them in the earthly pilgrimage that we're having, and they, in some cases, help us to connect and learn lessons that we need to learn in this life experience. We could do a whole program on this sometime, and I don't want to get off on that subject completely, but I did want to kind of touch on it for our viewers and our listeners. So the evil, the negative aspects, and the lower aspects of life, the shadow aspects of life, are real to the extent that they exist on this earth plane. They exist in this physical experience. And because we're physical beings and spiritual beings in a physical experience, we're often touched by them, and we have the experience of them and the impact of them. But then they're limited to this plane of existence, which is really a positive and wonderful thing. Now, our minds create and take with us some of the vestiges of that. And so that's an important issue to remember, that the way that we allow our minds to operate will be the way that we carry our minds from this life into the next. So that's kind of a beginning point, and we should do a program on that at some point in time. But as we do that, as we move into the lower or more negative aspects of our being, we definitely move away from our higher self. We're moving away from praise and celebration, and we're moving into depression and sadness, which are going in totally the opposite direction.
And as we always say, we live in our minds and not in the world. And so it's according to how it affects, how we allow it to affect us, whatever happens. And we know that change is vital. Change is totally necessary. And not all change is going to be seemingly agreeable to every person. And so it's how we view that change that matters. And I was thinking with part of my mind as you were speaking about the people, there's so much strife and turmoil in the world. There's the turmoil in the Middle East. There's turmoil all over the world. There's turmoil here in our own country. So to what extent do those parts of turmoil affect people more than they're capable of handling? And I think that nothing is an accident. If the small things of life are no accident and they all happen according to divine plan, then the larger ones certainly are more more so. And so it all is a part of our karmic progression in life, our evolutionary journey upward. And these things happen because that's just the way life is.
And life is filled with both positive and negative experiences. And so often we do learn from the negative experiences, but we have a choice from a personal standpoint in terms of how we're going to respond to them, from a mental standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, and from a spiritual standpoint. And of course, what we're talking about today is being embracers or demonstrators of people who praise and celebrate the positive aspects of life. But then we can also say that we praise and celebrate all aspects of life, because all of life is important. And I think that's the important concept too, to remember that we're not talking about the fact that just because, or if you believe, or if you follow these teachings or any other ideas, teachings, philosophical, psychological, or spiritual teachings, that you're going to be saved from the hurtful experiences in life, because we're all going to have those. And our lives are a combination of laughter and tears. And we can sometimes give praise and celebration in the midst of our tears. And we do that when we do celebration services for those who have passed away. And so it isn't that praise and celebration or being positive in the way that we live and think makes us believe in any way that we're going to avoid the negative or painful experiences of life. Rather, it teaches us, and the teaching brings us the reality that we're going to deal with them in a positive and affirmative way. But most importantly, we're going to deal with them, and we're going to get through them. And so that's the real key, because so many people will get into a negative experience. As you and I have both dealt in spiritual work and in our counseling work, when people are faced with with a bad diagnosis, when people are faced with financial disaster, when people lose their jobs, when people go through a separation or the death of a loved one, when people are challenged with all kinds of emotional and physical difficulties, those experiences are just that. They're experiences. And there's no reason to believe that Mike or Iris or anyone else isn't going to have them. But the way that Mike and Iris and anyone else deals with them is our choice. And so when we praise and celebrate every experience, we don't praise and celebrate the negative experience. We don't praise and celebrate the cancer, but we praise and celebrate what the cancer is going to bring to my life. We praise and celebrate what the financial setback is going to bring to me in the ability to deal in a positive and affirmative way. We can praise and celebrate the fact that we lost our job, not because we lost our job, but because losing that job is going to open the door to something new and magnificent. And I think that's really the way that we want to encourage people to think, not to think that we only praise and celebrate when things are going well. We praise and celebrate always, but we praise and celebrate the good, and we praise and celebrate the good in the midst of the negative.
Yes, and then we rejoice that we have the strength, courage, and understanding to go beyond that problem, to go beyond that. And I think that's the bottom line, that if we are able to, then we feel victorious, and we feel comfortable all in the midst of strife and chaos. But if we don't have the strength of character and the strength of purpose to carry on, then we feel defeated. And that's part of our growth pattern. I think it's part of the evolutionary journey that we all face. And why would we be here on Earth if we were not going to have change that's sometimes not desirable, seemingly not desirable? But we can see that we are in charge, and we can turn everything around and make it be for the good. There's some cliche, God meant it for someone meant it for bad, but God meant it for good. And everything can be meant for good and can be used in that way. And even the death of a loved one, we can see many positive aspects in that, although that's an extreme, and on surface, we think there's nothing we can see good about that.
It's hard to see the good sometimes. It's difficult to see the good. But then part of the teaching and part of the concept and ideas that we're sharing is to build within our consciousness, to build within our way of thinking, the mechanism so that we can not only go through the problem, another cliche, but not only go through the problems, but grow through the problems. And we grow through every experience. And we grow through each experience when we do live centered in a consciousness of praise and celebration. And that praise and celebration can be at any time in our lives. And you're absolutely right. There's nothing more devastating, nearly more devastating than the death of a loved one. But the fact is that very few of us are going to get through this life without the loss of a loved one, the death of a loved one. And so how we respond to that, how we respond to the challenges that we have, how we respond to our illnesses, how we respond to our disease, how we respond to the things that happen to those whom we love, how we respond to all of the aspects of life, both good and bad, really is determined in our mind. It's determined by the way that we think. And if we can think in a positive way, and if we can think ideas and thoughts that build and empower us to grow through the experiences, then we're going to laugh and we're going to cry, but we're going to be able to laugh again. And we're going to be able to celebrate again in happiness and rejoice. And we're going to be able to praise the reality that life has been good and that life is good, and that there is a wonderful spiritual reality that transcends us, undergirds us, and empowers us, and that the next life, as this life, is going to bring us to a wonderful and magnificent new stage in life. And often our next life, I'm not talking about when we die, but although that's true, but the next life means that after the illness, after the economic disaster, after the loss of the job, after the relationship ends, after all of these hurtful things, there's going to be a newness of life, and we can celebrate that reality and that truth.
Yes, and if we have faith that we will be victorious, or that those for whom we're praying will be victorious, then our faith is always justified, always, isn't it?
Absolutely. Our faith is always justified because the teaching is universal. And there's nothing that we have to do to make any of this happen. That's the key. We're not talking about something that Iris or Mike or anyone made up. We're talking about universal principles that apply to everyone in the world, every person, and that are accessible to every one of us.
And the human spirit is truly magnificent in its way of being victorious and overcoming. And as we look around us and see how courageous people, generally speaking, are, it's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
It is. And life is a wonderful thing.
Yes.
And life in all of its aspects is a wonderful and magnificent experience. And we're challenged to see the wonder and to see the magnificence of life and its experience. And then for many of us, one of the great joys is we're able to share that with others and to be co-creators with them in coming to a new and different realization of who and what they are as children of God, as human beings, and as whole and healthy people. We hope that you have found the information that we've been sharing with you useful, and we hope that you'll apply praise and celebration to every aspect of your life. And thank you for being with us.
Mike and Iris would like to extend a cordial invitation for you to join them this Sunday morning at 11 a.m. for our weekly celebration service at the beautiful Seaport Marina Hotel at the corner of Pacific Coast Highway and 2nd Street, adjacent to the Marina Pacifica and Marketplace shopping centers. There will be a guided meditation, prayers, spirited music, and a dynamic, life-changing new thought message. Please join us this Sunday. You will be warmly welcomed into the company of like-minded, positive, and uplifting people. And remember, whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can attain it through confident living.